Hello, everybody, and welcome to Get Lost, the show that everybody doesn't want to watch because we've already seen Lost and we know how it ends. But I don't care. This is my channel, and you can suffer through me going season by season and breaking this down. I've been through now 2 full seasons. Here we are starting season 3, the first half of season 3, and I have suckered the original true believer, Mr. Miracle, Dave at Mr. Miracle Comics. Thank you for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me on, John. I'm so excited to talk about Lost with everybody today. It's one of my secret nerd things that I love, and I'm glad that there are other secret nerds that love Lost out there as well. Sometimes you get the beat down and tell people if Lost is your favorite show.
You know, it's fun to love something that not everybody else likes, to appreciate something that not everybody else appreciates.
And Lost is one of those things that not everybody appreciates it, but if you do, man, you just love it. Like it's 100% or 0% with Lost. Either people stop watching right away or they just couldn't stop.
And I will say, I feel strongly that this season, this ending of the second and into the third season is kind of a make or break point for a lot of people. They really made up their minds of like, am I going to stick this out to the end or am I just done with this?
Yeah, and I think, that's kind of where I was at when I hit this season as well, was I was like, okay, things have been good, but every time we get an answer, it just leads to 10 more questions. And, we're just getting deeper and deeper. I need to see some resolve to some of this stuff where I'm going to give up, right? And then season 3 hit and there was some resolve and there were still more questions, but those questions were still much more intriguing and getting deeper. And then there was stuff that was answered and you're like, those answers were like, what? Why? And so season 3 drew me in deeper and I was hooked forever.
Right. And for me, I felt the same way. The show builds up. So for those that don't know, we're obviously dealing with Lost, that stranded on an island plane crash story, an island that's not necessarily what you think it is. And season 2 sort of brought in this idea that we weren't alone on this island. We started hearing about these others and who they might be. And then for me, I feel very strongly season 3 is that season where we get to like crack the nut of what is these others and get a look inside of kind of this new dynamic and what's going on there. How do you feel about the others as sort of a maybe you hate them, maybe you love them, like this entity in these early seasons?
Well, for me, like up until now, the others had always kind of been these shadowy guys in the dark. We weren't quite sure who they were. They seemed kind of like they were entirely in control of the island and sort of in this like position of power, and maybe was super dangerous to all of the beach people on the beach, the passengers from 815 that were on the beach, right? So there was always this element of danger, but you didn't quite know who they were, and are they worse than they appear? And so here in season 3, when we finally start to get to know a few of them, and we realize that they're just people and they're having their own struggles and they're having their own difficulties, and they're not as dangerous as we thought because they have their own vulnerabilities as well, right? So it added a lot of depth to the others, and it really, it was also nice to just get away from that core 15 characters that the show has
Totally
been about for the last 2 seasons. And now we have this whole new group of people and we're starting to get new characters and new stories and new backgrounds. And so that was nice too. It was like almost like a little bit of a new season, like a new beginning, like a season 1, but the other, right? Because we all of a sudden were introduced to all these new characters.
Now, did you feel the same way about the what would they call the tailies, the people in season 2 that were the sort of new characters? Because I had in the discussions we had in the last 2 of these live streams, there's a lot of like, I don't really like Ryan's Fire Guy Ryan hated the tailies. He's like Ana Lucia, Mr. Echo. He's like, I don't like any of these guys. I want to spend time with my characters. And I know that some people complain the same thing about the others. Like, I don't care about Julia. I don't care about Ben. I don't want these guys. I want my guys.
Right. And, I get that. But the way that they introduced the others in with the beach characters, I felt like we were getting to know the others, but we were still getting our guys. Our core group were still leading the story, right? But now we were just kind of departing into these other people. And, it's not, you can't just take everything, for the one season. We got to remember we're going to have more seasons. So we're going to need to have this more characters to keep our interest. Because if we just have, 6 seasons of Kate stories, it's going to get a little bit monotonous.
And it honestly, it was after 2.
Yeah. Like
but
I agree.
I also think that you can't get answers without having these people, right? Like for our survivors, every answer is given to them by someone that they encounter and some person who has a piece of the puzzle that they're missing. And for me, I love the others across the board. I don't know that I have any of them that I hate, even the ones you're supposed to hate, Mr. Friendly Tom or whatever. Like, there's so many characters in that crew that I find them all just kind of fascinating for the notes that they get to add to the orchestra. And for me, Perry threw it out. Like, Juliet is fire. I agree. I think I freaking love that character. I love the way this season starts with her. Like, she's doing her hair and washing her. She's been crying and she's looking in the mirror and she's at a house and she's playing the downtown, right? She's like walking through the room and she's preparing for some kind of book club. She burns her fingers on the muffins. Like, you feel it's totally normal. Book club is happening. They're breaking down Carrie, which is freaking awesome that they're talking about Stephen King. And then boom, something shakes. They run outside and we see this plane coming over. We see Ben come out of the house. We realize, no, these are the others. We've been hanging with the others this whole time because this is the longest we've spent with the others where they're not pretending to be whatever. Because we've had Ben for a lot of last season pretending to be, what did he go by? Yeah, Henry Gale.
Yes.
And he went by. We had Henry Gale locked in a room pretending that he was this guy, but now we have like the real them guard down in a moment, and I love that moment. And it comes back later in an episode in the second half of this season. They replay that little bit. I love her as a character. I think she's amazing, and I love her arc on the show. I think it's exceptional. And I think they hit her notes every time, right off the bat, perfectly.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Juliet as well. I thought, like, she really kicked butt, right? She was smart. She was tough. She was devious. A lot of the times, like, you don't know whose side Juliet's on. Is she on Jack's side? Is she on Ben's side? Is she on the other side? Is she on the beach people's side? No, now she's betraying these guys. No, she's betraying those guys, but she's actually betraying these guys when she betrays those guys. So her character was like a big ball of craziness in a lot of ways. But the actress, and I forget her name right off the top.
Elizabeth Mitchell.
Elizabeth Mitchell did just such a fantastic job of like keeping that calm portrayal of character. Like, there's the one scene in this season in the episodes that we're talking about where she's got the gun to Kate's head.
Oh.
And Sawyer has to drop his gun because he's like, I can see it in her eyes. Like, she would have shot you. Right?
Oh, yeah.
She wouldn't have hesitated. She would have shot you if I didn't drop that gun. Right. And that sums up Juliet. Like, she's no BS. She's got her own agenda.
And all the way into the moment where she lets Sawyer and Kate go and pulls the trigger, but on her own people.
Yeah, where she saves Sawyer's life, and she does that on purpose, and she really has a plan to try and take over Ben's position or Henry's position, in my opinion, right? Like, that's her underlying agenda, in my opinion. And at this point in the season, I have no reason to believe that that's not going to still happen, like, on her agenda.
Right. So
there's things that happen to Juliet later, but
at this point in the story, right when we start, 3 of our primary characters, arguably the 3 heroes, the love triangle of the show, Jack, Sawyer, and Kate, have been taken captive by these others. And they sort of wake up in these unusual sort of situations. Jack is in a glass room for a lot of this season. It's like an operating room for animals in a zoo. You got Sawyer, who's in a bear cage for the polar bears on the island, which is a riot. I love the bear cages. And then you got Kate waking up in the showers and sort of being in an awkward situation with Tom, Mr. Friendly, basically telling her to take a shower, and they got her some new clothes and things like that. and joking because she says, you know, I'm not going to shower in front of you. And he's like, you're not my type. And later we find out it's because he's gay. You know, he's like, I don't really care, you know, and she's embarrassed because it's the others.
Yes.
I love that whole dynamic of this zoological station where we find ourselves. You have the sort of science side where they've clearly been doing animal research. And then you've got the cages, Sawyer working and playing with the little sort of system for getting a fish pellet from the bear, like in the bear cage. I love all of that. Kate being able to slip out of her bars because she's skinny enough to get out. It's just, I love that whole dynamic of that whole place. And watching, of course, like you're saying with Juliet, that moment where she's letting him watch, you know, they let Jack watch the World Series where the Red Sox win as a way to prove to him that they have contact with the outside world and what's going on in the real world. And then later she plays the VHS tape where she says it's a movie on silent, but it's really her holding up cue cards where she's admitting her plan of trying to kill Ben. Really cool, devious, like you're saying, almost Hitchcockian kind of scene. I just love that whole environment. How do you feel about I know some people love it. Again, some people love and hate these scenes, but for me, that whole time spent in the polar bear, whatever station, I dig it.
Oh, I dig it too. Like, oh, that answers the question of why there's polar bears on a tropical island, right? First of all, right?
I still get people asking me that question. Why were there polar bears? Why were there polar bears? And it's like they spend so much time in that research facility where they're clearly showing you Dharma was doing research in this environment with those animals, but people still are like, why are there polar bears there?
Yes. And yeah, just to see like the humans trapped in there, and then, you know, the others are making jokes to Sawyer about, you know, oh, you got a fish cracker? Man, it only took the bear 2 hours or whatever, right? And Sawyer took
so good
for him to do it. Just little things like that, and yeah, that it wasn't really adequate to hold Kate, and, you know, they're kind of crossing back and forth, and they're making all these plans, and it's like, guys, don't you think they're watching you, or, you know,
right?
But and then the whole idea with Jack inside of the operating area, you know, he realizes he's in a fish tank, or at one point, like, I'm in an aquarium, like it seems so weird to him. And, you know,
well, and then they moved later, they're going to move Jack into different, you know, he ends up in the bear cages. They keep reusing the dynamics.
Yeah, people keep seeming to be shuffled out into the bear cage. We had Carl, Sawyer, Kate, Jack. They were all out in that cage at one point in the first 13 episodes here anyway. And it seems like they're only out there for a few minutes, and then, or a few hours, and all of a sudden, oh, we need you to do this, and we need you to do that, and come here, Kate, or come here, Jack, and come here, Sawyer, right? Or we're gonna kill you now, Sawyer, so come out of the cage.
And then of course we have like the way they treat each of these characters, I think, is very fascinating, right? Their work on Jack to break down his stubbornness, right? They keep, Juliet mentions a few times, you know, Jack, I don't hate you. I think you're just stubborn, man. You're just stubborn.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to break him down from his stubbornness. Whereas Sawyer, they're going to break him down physically, and they're going to break him down with like playing him in a con, right? They're going to get to him his way.
Sawyer, I like Sawyer, but he is the con man that gets conned the most. Everybody ends up conning Sawyer at some point. The others do, Hurley does, John does, everybody does at some point. So yeah, there's that whole scene where they need to get control of Sawyer. And so they fake him out and pretend like they put something inside him that will kill him if his heart rate busts over 140, right? Which is a pretty fast heart rate, but something you would do if you were running and trying to escape from being shot at or whatever, right? It would kill you, which of course settles Sawyer right down. Even when Kate's trying to get him to escape, he's like, no, I'm not doing it. That'll be the end of me if I try that stuff. So, you know, and he can't tell Kate, because if he tells Kate, they'll give him the shock and kill him at there. So, or no, they threatened to put
it in her. Yeah,
that's right. So, and he cares about Kate, so he doesn't want that. So he won't tell her what's going on. He won't.
And I love the bit when she's changing out of her clothes, and heart rate monitor starts.
That's right. And he's just like, no, I just gotta calm down. Just hang on,
He just pours the bucket of water over his head. I love it. Yeah. So I like the way they go after them all. I really love the bit when we're building the runway, right? They have Kate and Sawyer on like physical labor, right? And Sawyer's like working. And finally he's like, I'm done with this. He's been watching Kate sweat in that skirt. He just throws his gear down, goes over, and he's like, I'm just going to kiss this girl. Doesn't matter what they're going to do to me. But he uses it as a moment, right, to get what he wants and to learn a little information, like you're saying. And then Juliet, of course, calls his bluff by putting the gun to Kate. I just love I feel like every portion of this part of the story functions in a real positive level, where you get a lot of pieces of information, but also it's all centered around these characters and how they think and how they act.
Yeah, and especially Kate and Sawyer here at the beginning. And yeah, and Sawyer, putting a character like Sawyer in a situation like slave labor, that's just oil and water, right?
Yeah.
That's not gonna work. He's not the physical labor being told what to do kind of fellow, right? So we knew that he was going to act up. The others know he's going to act up, which is where the big con comes in from Ben to get control of him, right?
And that's one of my favorite episodes, that Every Man for Himself, the fourth one. There's a lot of good stuff for me in that one. I'm a Sawyer fan. I generally like his episodes a lot. But there's a lot of good stuff in there and a lot of little funny jokes. I think he calls one of the guys Chinatown because he broke his nose earlier in the episode beforehand. He calls him Chinatown.
That's right.
Yeah. And then something about just the way that you see into who he is by how he's thinking and responding to the others and the way they're sort of abusing him. Now, his flashback in that episode is not one of my favorites. It's a little more bland with him in jail and sort of some of the stuff that's going on there with his baby mama. But the island stuff is solid.
But I think like the jail stuff was important because it talks about how Sawyer conned his way out of jail, right? Like that's how good of a con man he is. That he can actually con his way out of jail time, 6 years of jail time. Right. And he just happened to be released in time to get on that flight.
Yeah.
Which was, coincidental. Nothing is coincidental on Lost.
Well, and it sets up her because obviously Cassidy plays a significant part going forward as well. His ex-love interest is significant going forward.
Oh, yeah, Cassidy is. And what was I going to say here? To Sawyer. There's so much stuff going on in my head about Sawyer, right?
Well, we're skipping around. It's a little harder. I'm trying to do a slightly different format. For those who've watched before, thank you, Comic Head 84 for coming by, Old Wolf, Tank Collects, and Perry Comics, all jumping in here at different points. I even saw Ben Compton was in here. We're trying to do something a little different because if you go episode by episode, these things can be really labor intensive and kind of over the top. But I thought it'd be more fun to go through things we liked, things we had questions about, parts that we felt were valuable, and kind of where we felt like this season fit in the overall arc of Lost. And for me, it was the others and kind of these early moments getting to kind of see how this other side of the island, if you thought of the island almost as having like three portions, Dharma, others, and the survivors, this is our chance to bridge that sort of second group and get a real understanding of who they are.
Yeah, and so, we're trying not to go episode by episode. We're trying to give much more of a kind of an overview and pick up favorite parts for sure. So I'm trying to do that too. So I'm trying to think of but when we do this, it's like, oh yeah, what parts am I thinking of that were seasons later? Because I have seen Lost in its entirety a few times. Right? So I'm trying not to reveal too much and leave, take the meat off the bone for your next guest that's going to come in.
Oh, it's fine. And Perry Comics, actually, Perry's going to join me next time at the end or the beginning of June when we're going to look at the end of this season, which has a bunch of the episodes that I think people remember most clearly from the show. I will say this portion of the season, these 13 episodes, we're talking about episodes 1 through 13 of season 3. it is a bit like a heart rate monitor, right? A bit like Sawyer's pacemaker, where it's got real good highs and real good lows. Before we went live, we both joked about 2 episodes. One, Sun and Jin's episode, Glass Ballerina, and 2, the Jack flashback, Strangers in a Strange Land, which is a classic as far as the punchline for a lot of Lost jokes, is this episode that has Bai Ling and spends an entire flashback basically telling us what Jack's tattoos mean.
Yeah, and those 2 episodes are definitely a low in these 13, right? And that's a real tough call, but I gotta pick the Jack tattoo episode.
I respect that.
Yeah. That's my least favorite one of this one. I mean, like literally, there's at least 50% of the episode talking about Jack and accomplishing nothing, right? And to get to a 1-minute scene of him getting a tattoo, getting beat up, and kicked out of Thailand.
Basically, yeah.
And again, we see Jack's obsessiveness, where like the last time he was trying to follow around his dad, and he was trying to follow around his ex-wife, and now he's following around this tattoo girl secretly to find out what she's doing.
It's like, useless, right?
Yeah, Jack, you got a little creepy streak to you there, buddy.
Absolutely. His obsessiveness, definitely.
Yeah, I shouldn't be following these ladies around like this all the time. You're gonna get no wonder you get beat up, right, by their brother.
Now, in that episode, you also have this, they introduce a new other, the sheriff. And I even struggled remembering, like, do we ever see this lady again on the entire show? They make a huge deal out of her for this one episode. And in my brain, I'm like, I'm struggling to remember if we ever even see this lady again.
Yeah, like this is the woman that walks in and reads Jack's tattoo.
Yeah, she interrogates Jack a little bit. They're basically putting Juliet on trial within the community of the others because she killed one of their own, in order to help Sawyer and Kate escape. And they interview Jack just to get information on her guilt or innocence. So this sheriff character is significant in this episode, but then gone.
Yeah, like totally gone, because I don't remember her after this episode.
And I remember that being a bit of a frustration the second time I watched the series from the beginning. I had felt like, what is the deal? Because I like the actor. I think she's really good. I like the sort of a setup of a judicial system in some ways within the community of the others. But I felt like it was definitely one of those moments that never paid off in any way. Like we never had one of our characters have to go through the trial. It felt like a writing moment where they were trying to set up the possibility of doing something later with this, and then they just never got around to it.
Yeah, Lost has several writers, so maybe one writer was trying to set something up, and another writer just had a different idea, and it never panned out for it, right? But yeah, I thought she was a good character, and it was good to think of the others having several leaders, like if one person got bumped off, that someone else would take their place, and maybe that person was worse than Ben, like the sheriff. Like she was willing to just kill Juliet straight out, where Ben was like, nah, I need her, I'll keep her, right? Because he thinks like, what am I going to need these people for? How am I going to use these people later on, right?
And I'll say that side of the story is what makes this an episode I like a little bit more than the Glass Ballerina with the Jin and Sun, or the other low point this season is that Claire episode where she's trying to get like a homing pigeon to send a message, and flashing back to her possible father being Jack's dad. Like that one I found, and you said obviously the flashback reveal is valuable, so that one elevates maybe that episode a little bit, but that one is just as garbage for me. This is 3 real low points.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Claire is definitely probably my least favorite character. Claire and Aaron, the little baby.
Yeah.
Like Aaron's not crying through half the episode, then Claire's whining about something or trying to find food, or she's mad and kicking Charlie out of here, and I'm not talking to him. And she seemed like a very childish person, especially to be having a child. Like she wanted to stomp her feet and run off whenever something didn't go her way, right?
Totally.
So I never really connected very well with Claire.
Well, and I think that Shannon probably, and even this is another thing that's very controversial in these 13 episodes, but Nikki and Paolo, I think all those characters suffer from that same issue of very sort of self-centered, and it's hard to really latch onto them as caring about them because they really seem to be very shallow.
Yeah, I mean, at least Dickie dies. So there's a little redeeming there. And I would put that Claire episode just slightly above the other two, though, just because of the reveal, right? And that had more to do with Jack.
And obviously was a plot line that people have been thinking and maybe was true, and then of course plays as significant going forward.
Yeah, right. But it was kind of a guessing game, so it was a little bit of a moment, but that was about it for that moment. The rest of it was like, if I had a PVR, I would be fast forwarding. Right.
So I went through these and I was looking at like which one would be my favorite episode, and I kind of went back and forth. There's lots of really good ones in here. You mentioned before we got started that there's a lot of John Locke kind of going through here and a lot of Jack. For me, I think it's possible my favorite one is probably Juliet's flashback, Not in Portland, which focuses on how she came to be with the others. It's the first time we get a flashback from the others. And I really like her story. I like the section with her sister and cancer chemotherapy versus in vitro fertilization, and her sort of skills as a doctor, and the really creepy use of Richard Alpert in that sort of bus crash moment. I love all that stuff. And then of course it's partnered with her trying to kill Ben in surgery and then successfully killing the gentleman who was one of the others, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember. Derek or something is his name.
I have trouble remembering his name as well.
I should have written it down. Darn it. Danny.
It was Danny.
Danny, right. I knew it was something with a D there. Yeah, that was a good episode. There were several good episodes. Like this season was a real up and downer, right? Like we got a few of those poor episodes, and they really you get two really good ones and a poor one. And then two really good ones, and then a poor one, and then two really good ones and a so-so one, and then three really good ones to end it off. You know what I mean? So, or is the Claire one in that last?
The Claire one's in there, but I'll give it to you because the two that are bookending her episode are really great as well. That's right. There's a Saeed one called Enter 77, and then we're finishing with the Locke episode, The Man from Tallahassee, which is definitely a high watermark.
Yeah, and my favorite episode of the season for sure. Well, it's a toss-up. I really like the pilot for the season as well.
Yeah, The Tale of Two Cities, the season premiere is a Jack episode. Yeah,
it's a Jack episode, but it's also written by J.J. Abrams, and he did quite a bit of writing in the beginning, but then took on more of that producer role. Didn't do as much writing, so it was nice to see him come back to write the pilot for the season. And I've always really liked his scripting, and I like his character dialogue a lot as well. The way he writes character dialogue and the way he keeps like a script pacing, And
it reminded me a lot of the season 2 premiere where we got into the hatch to see how Desmond was living. In this case, we got into the others' enclave to kind of see how Juliet's living, and then they did some really cool stuff of showing, Sawyer in the bear cage, Juliet in the shower room, Jack in his locked up space, and then I think that's even the one where they end up flooding. Don't they end up flooding the polar bear station where Jack is, because he doesn't believe Ben that the door is dangerous, and he opens it and then it just gets flooded, and then Juliet clocks him. Really awesome.
Yeah, Jack doesn't realize he's underwater and he opens up the wrong door. Everybody told him not to do it, but he of course didn't believe it.
The only thing about that episode that I don't like as much is that the flashback is Jack just basically dealing with the divorce and trying to figure out who his wife is seeing on the side. I didn't care as much for that, but the on-island stuff is just amazing.
Well, the writer still has to touch back to season 2 to make sure that the third season connects in a way, right? And J.J. Abrams really set the tone for the whole season by introducing all these new others characters. Right, so he's like, these are your characters you're using this season. I'm the producer. Go write this up for me, right?
Right.
And here's the first episode to get you started.
Yeah.
So either the pilot episode or The Man from Tallahassee, and I would pick The Man from Tallahassee just because John Locke is my favorite character on Lost. And the Man from Tallahassee was the episode that cemented that into John being my favorite character. Right.
I'll tell you, this is one of my favorite Lost shirts I own. And the one I was wearing when I met Damon Lindelof, I was actually wearing this at the park when his kid was playing with Kate. It was totally amazing. But yeah, I agree. Locke is a phenomenal character. And this episode where we get the final real kind of reveal of how did he end up in the wheelchair, and you get to see Locke both succeeding completely at what he wants to accomplish, which is not a common theme for Locke. But also you get to see Ben play him beautifully.
Oh, yeah. Ben's manipulation hits its high point here in that episode where he manipulates Locke into blowing up the submarine. He knew exactly what he needed to do, and he found his man as soon as Locke showed up with the C4 in his backpack. Yeah, and, Locke is one of those characters, like a lot of characters on Lost that I've never really liked. I've always gone to the characters that seem to reveal a little bit more slowly who they are. And Locke is one of those guys. You get a little bit that first season, a little bit more. You're like, oh, this guy was in a wheelchair. Why was he in a wheelchair? And then, oh, what's he doing here? And why is he so good with guns? And why is he and so the Man from Tallahassee opens up a lot. We find out, season 3 here, we find out, why is John good with farming and guns and stuff like that. Well, he lived on a hippie commune and he did all this crazy stuff, right? And he was a survivalist kind of after he was all depressed, and he, squirreled himself away and just read crazy militia magazines and stuff. We find out how he got paralyzed and that it was his dad that tried to kill him, right? It was a murder attempt that went wrong and he ended up being paralyzed by his own father in the thing. And so when you find that out, you see, all right, John is not all upstairs. You can't be, a perfectly mentally healthy person and have all of these terrible, terrible things happen to you, especially what happened to him, like continuously by his father, stealing his kidney, abandoning him, and then now an attempted murder, right? And so I always really like John because I'm always like, okay, give me more, but they just sort of hand you little bits of that one. Whereas a character like Jack, it's all, I'm divorced and I'm really mad at my dad. Right?
It's all very upfront with Jack.
Jack becomes a very, very much more interesting character in the last season of Lost.
Totally.
Right?
But he's stripped away of all the stuff that was holding him back.
Yeah, right. But here in season 3, I think a lot of people probably stopped watching Lost because Jack was such a main character and he was so cardboard and one-sided, right? He really, like, everything that Jack talks about his daddy issues all the time, or the fact that he doesn't, Kate, and he's, all about Kate, and I'm not sure about Kate. Should I get Kate? And I don't know if my dad would approve, and this and that. But with John, it was like, who is this guy? He seems really this. Oh, now I find out he's paralyzed. Oh, now I find out he's kind of a leader. And now I'm finding out this and this. And it just keeps sort of peeling back for John a lot more. So John always kept me much more interested. A lot like Sawyer. Sawyer was one of those characters that got peeled back slowly, right? And so Sawyer was one of my favorite characters. Much more so than, like I said, than Jack or Charlie. Charlie seemed to be kind of a lot of upfront stuff.
Yeah, and I think that when I originally heard that the plan was to get rid of Jack in the pilot, I could see why that would have been a powerful decision, because they clearly had this one layer, this one note to play for him, and not a lot beyond it. Whereas my two favorites probably are Sawyer and Sayid. And I felt like there was a lot for them to do, especially in the first, 4 or 5 seasons. There was a lot.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, Sayid, again, another character that start out and you're like, who is this guy? And then, oh, he was a military guy, and oh, he's from an Arab country and this and that. And, I really dig Sayid. Like, I really like Sayid. And Sayid, for people to like him, he was such a popular character. And if you think about it at the time,
right,
having one of your main characters be an Iraqi military person, because the Gulf War was in full swing in 2004, right? So that was ballsy by J.J. Abrams to make him a hero, right? On, big national
and
television.
having him torture a lot of the popular characters on the show at the same time.
Yeah, and then show that he was a sadistic soldier, but he was being a soldier. Right.
And now the other episode you mentioned as being a favorite is the one 2 before the final episode we watched in this run. Enter 7-7 is Sayid's only real episode in this run. A group of the characters decide they're going to go rescue Jack, who's left alone with the others, and they find their way through a couple of interesting phenomena on the island. They had the sonic fence, which comes back into play a couple of times during this third season, which I love the freaking sonic fence.
I like the sonic fence too.
It's so badass. And then they find Mikhail, the eye-patched guy from season 2 that was made a little moment, and then it was now we actually figure out where he is and what he is. And in that Sayid episode, I love the way Sayid so rarely gets taken by surprise. Sayid so often reads things in a situation that nobody else can and is a step ahead of even the audience most of the time. It's kind of why I was disappointed by moments in season 2 where he gets so clearly bamboozled. It was just I could see that coming. Sayid needed to be 2 steps ahead of me like he always is.
Yeah. I think Sayid, he's so intelligent, and he, like you said, he's always that 1 step ahead, and he very much plays that intelligence officers. But this episode, his flashback episode, it really grounded Sayid. For me, to have his background that he had being an interrogator for the Iraqis and all this stuff, and then to show when he was talking to that woman how remorseful he was about all of that, right? That really humanized Sayid to me. So even though he seems to have this gruff exterior, the audience knows now that he's got a lot of feelings, right? He's hurting for the things that he did.
Yeah.
There was a film to his character, I thought.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think there's a film that I loved in high school, and I'm gonna struggle to remember what country it's centered on, but it's based on a play called Death and the Maiden. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really good film. It's a Roman Polanski film, one of his later films, and it stars Ben Kingsley and Sigourney Weaver and another gentleman I can't remember, but it's basically just a 3-person story. And the idea is Sigourney Weaver is the wife of a politician in a South American country that had some very dramatic pasts, a lot of violence, and a lot of sort of the government sort of fascistly trying to control, and then the people were rising up in revolutions and things. And so the husband is a politician of the revolution, and so the country has now adopted revolutionary culture, and they've moved on. And he's a doctor, and he's trying to push for some changes in their country. She was in the same boat as him, but she was captured by the old government and tortured. And so in this story, you have a very similar story playing out where in the movie, Sigourney Weaver's husband brings home this gentleman from dinner that was a friend that he had just sort of happened to meet up with. And she hears his voice and is certain he was the man who tortured her. So right. She knocks, this is Ben Kingsley's character is the one she's certain of. She knocks him out, ties him to a chair, knocks her husband out because she thinks he'll object, and starts torturing the man she believes tortured her. And of course, Ben Kingsley spends basically the whole movie saying, I didn't do this. It's not me. And she keeps saying, yes, it is. I'm 100% certain. And the husband is stuck in the middle trying to say wait, let's just talk this out. We can figure this out. And it's similar to what's going on here with Sayid, where he's taken captive and a woman and her husband are sort of debating what to do with him because they believe he's the one that tortured his wife.
So you think this episode is maybe a little homage to that?
I definitely think so. It's a great play and a really, really great movie. Sigourney Weaver was nominated for the Oscar. She was just absolutely gripping. Really, really underrated film that I remember really digging when I was in high school or into college.
Okay, well,
I got flashbacks when I first saw this episode, and then rewatching it, I was like, oh man, I want to see Death and the Maiden again. The title comes from a musical, like an opera, I think, Death and the Maiden. That in the story of that film, the torturer would always play this music for her when he would come and visit Sigourney Weaver. Right. So the music is really a big part of that story. But in this, we have Saeed swearing his innocence, and little by little, sort of like you're saying, they're peeling him back emotionally to reveal kind of the guilt that's been a big part of Saeed from the beginning.
Right. And, now we see why he always wants to be so helpful, because that guilt would drive you to be, I want to help everybody. I want to be a good person now. I want to do the right thing all the time. I have all these skills, these interrogation skills and such, and maybe I'll use them to help my friends and, do good instead of bad, and, go after bad people, the others.
So this episode brings up a real question for me that repeatedly through the show, we have this sort of, I guess you'd say like this island ability that's never, as far as I understand, never fully explained, but the island seems to be able to recreate animals from our characters' pasts into this island world. We've seen Kate and the black horse, right? That was a second season thing where this black horse from her past, it's literally there because Sawyer sees it, everybody sees it. It's real. But they never see the horse again, right?
Right.
Now we have Saeed's cat.
Right.
Because it's in his flashback, and yet it seems to me to be the same cat that Mikhail has in his shack.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. Like, I noticed that as well. Like, it's the animal, like the island has definitely got a lot of crazy things going on, and the Lost writers really play it out subtly sometimes, right? Like you had mentioned, there's little things that the writers continually do throughout all the seasons, right, that seem to like align with the island. The book Carrie, for instance,
right?
They're always talking about the book Carrie. The game Mousetrap, that will show up again and again and again, and people have called it a what is it, ex machina. Like that's the ex machina of Lost is Mousetrap, the game. And animals seem to be another one of those things that seem to reoccur all the time. Like it sort of grounds our, like it's telling our characters there's something way off with this island. Like it's not, it knows about you. It knows your past. It knows what you like. It knows about your animal. It knows something, like, and it's not coincidence. Like I said, there is no coincidence on Lost, right?
And they have the like smoke monster that like seems to do that. It's a whole like scan. It scans you and absorbs information about you, because that plays out in a big way with Echo and his final episode on the show in this season, where
Echo gets taken out by the smoke monster, right? Which I wasn't too upset about.
But it does seem to like it takes the persona of his brother, and then when he doesn't seem particularly remorseful to his brother, it lashes out at him. So there's that element of maybe the island sort of scanning characters and then creating physical manifestations of some of their, I don't know, of guilt or pent up emotion.
Or yeah, whatever they were like most dwelling on in their last, before they hit the island kind of thing. The island seems to know about it. Like, yeah, very much like the smoke monster when he takes out Echo, it really has a much more supernatural feeling to the island. Like something really supernatural is happening here now beyond this weird smoke monster.
Right.
But that the fact that it has an intelligence to lure you in with like illusions of your brother or this and that, but then be so violent and just kill you and like grab you and kill you. Right. So, we could spend a whole episode talking about Jacob, the smoke monster, and the man in black. That's for sure.
We'll save that for the season 5 or 6 crew, right?
Yeah, it gets rolling with the smoke monster for sure. But yeah, you know what? The smoke monster was one of those very first elements that gave you a clue that there's something really off with the Lost Island. It's not just a regular tropical island out in the middle of nowhere. There's some real stuff going on here. Of course, all of a sudden we see polar bears and whatnot.
I would say I tweeted back when I used to really enjoy Twitter. There was a meme going around that said it was making fun of Donald Trump for something, I think, and the hashtag was like more electable or whatever than Donald Trump. And I put together a picture, a screenshot of the man in black, the smoke monster, and I tweeted it, and I tagged the actor who plays the man in black, and then he retweeted it on his Twitter It was very. I was totally blown away that he even like read the stuff. But he's a very left wing guy, and that actor, and it was very funny to like see my other people tagging it and sending it around. But it was a good Lost meme. I made a little Lost meme.
Well, he must have enjoyed it if you retweeted it out.
Oh yeah.
Right after that.
Now, there's two things we're kind of wrapping up here. There's a couple of things we kind of passed by. You had mentioned Hurley having kind of an important part to play in this season a little bit before we started. And then I don't want to skip over one of my favorite characters on the show as far as non-survivors go. Desmond has a big episode this season that I really love. Is there one of those you want to dive into first?
Well, let's talk about Hurley.
Sure.
Okay, so we all know by this point that Hurley's won the lottery, right? He's probably the richest survivor. Still on the beach, but nobody believes him, of course.
No, not at all.
But in his flashbacks, and in particular this one, he's always talking about curses. I've cursed this money and these numbers that keep coming up. The sequence of numbers that they plugged into the computer was the numbers he used to win the lottery. And he thinks he's cursed because of these numbers that are always coming up. So in his flashback, his mom is trying to tell him he's not cursed by bringing back his father.
I love Cheech Marin, man. Cheech Marin's awesome.
Great job. I'm a big fan of Cheech Marin as an actor. So
perfect casting.
Yeah. You know, when they're going over the old Camaro when he's just a little guy, and then when he comes back,
the wig, that crazy curly wig he wears.
Yeah. But of course, Hurley automatically thinks he's in it for the money. He's come back for the money, right? Which, you know, I kind of would, think so.
Probably did, but in some ways.
Yeah. And of course, but, his mom brings back in order to convince Hurley that the curse isn't real. Even though all these things, like her house had burned down at one point because Hurley was cursed. And
the asteroid. I freaking love the asteroid striking the Mr. Cluck's restaurant. It's just hysterical.
That one, yeah. So he's given a terrible interview, and Trisha Takanaka, their Channel 5 News, goes to get some shots of the interior of the restaurant he's bought. And while he's talking about the curse with another character, a meteorite flies out of the sky, destroys the restaurant. Luckily, Hurley is out in the parking lot, but Trisha Takanaka is unfortunately killed in the event. She's blown up.
It's a riot.
And then we go back to the island, and Hurley finds the V-dub, right?
Which I think is sort of like this season's golf course, right?
Right. And Hurley's a good character in that there's a lot of intense stuff going with Kate and Sawyer being captured and new other characters, and finding out Ben is this big crazy leader and all this stuff with John, that you kind of get a nice breath this episode with Hurley enjoying himself, trying to get this van going. And if you've ever owned a VW van, those vans are bulletproof. I believe they actually could have started that van.
Which, having seen the whole series, I don't remember how the Volkswagen ends up on its side.
It doesn't. It's just he finds it in the jungle on its side.
Because I remember how Roger Workman. So there's Roger Workman is the skeleton, right? And I remember how Roger Workman dies because they show you that later on. And I remember why he's got beer in the truck and all this kind of stuff. But I don't remember the vehicle being flipped on its side. That's the only thing that bugs me about this is I feel like there's something missing there where I don't think it naturally would have just fallen over.
No, I think he did flip it. I think Workman did flip it, didn't he?
Does he? Because I don't remember that happening in the season. But maybe maybe when I get to that, I can say Mr. Miracle was right.
Maybe it's a continuity error, and everybody just assumed it was fine.
But I do love the whole skeleton. He calls him Roger Workman, and then Sawyer's like, he's a workman. He's a Dharma janitor.
Yeah, that's not his last name.
And they're just going to pound this Dharma beer, which is like 30, 40 years old at least. They're just pounding this awful Dharma beer. You can almost taste how bad it probably is. But it's like the first beer. Sawyer's he's drinking it on the beach. He's drinking it in the van. He's drinking it in the jungle.
He was happy to have warm beer, no problem.
Right?
That's how Hurley convinced him to help flip the van back on its tires, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the tires were still inflated and everything, which was lucky. After sitting in the jungle for 30 years, there's still oil, there's still gasoline. Nothing
has leaked sideways from being sitting in so long.
bulletproof, those cars. Anyway,
But it's a great moment, right? When the music gets going in the car again, and it reminded me a lot of that golf course from the previous season.
Right, and so there's a lot of fun that goes along with Hurley, and there's a lot of jokes, and Hurley always seems to lighten the mood quite a bit. So with this episode, after having been so heavy, it's kind of a nice little break to have a nice little play time with our characters for an episode. And Hurley is always that, calm voice of reason out there. Even though he thinks he's crazy and cursed.
Well, he suffers a lot, but he seems to always be able to find the meaning, the value in the suffering and the positives that he can pull out of it.
Yeah, and I think Hurley is a very valuable member of the survivors for that reason. Right?
Absolutely.
He's always able to pull the others up and get the positive out of people.
So this leaves us with Desmond, who, again, I say, like, probably my favorite of the non-survivor characters, the characters that they add little by little over all these seasons. Desmond is in my top 5 with Ryan. That episode where he gets his sort of his Christmas time flashback in the later seasons is one of my all-time favorites. The Constant is what it's called. This one is right there with it as far as just really great episode that shows a lot of who Desmond is, but then it's the sci-fi stuff, man, that really draws me in. This skipping through time and characters who are. I love. This is where we first meet Ellie Hawken, and this idea that she knows that he's skipping through time, is fully aware of what's happening. Right. All that stuff is just like mind-blowingly cool.
I mean, yeah, this is Desmond's season. Like season 3 is Desmond's season, right? We learn a lot more about Desmond. And he becomes a much, much more likable character rather than just a guy down a hatch, right? All of a sudden, he's got dimension, and then he seems to be linking up with the island and having these weird, premonition powers, right? All of a sudden, he, puts up a lightning rod, and which just happens gets struck by lightning that night, and and then what's the next thing he did? Oh, he was talking about John Locke's speech before John Locke made the speech. And then he just comes tearing out of the jungle and saves Claire from drowning for no particular reason. And so Charlie and Hurley realize, oh, this guy can time travel. They get him drunk, and then we get a flashback of Desmond's real life.
And most of this episode is in the flashback. There's actually very little. It's like sort of almost end capped by the island, because it's sort of like Desmond just like jumps into this like other universe and is gone for most of the story, because we get to see what happened to him when he turned the key.
Yeah, like without commercials, an episode's about 42 minutes long, and I bet you there's about half an hour of that is him flashback.
Which is rare for the show. It's usually almost like the opposite.
Yeah, usually we're getting these little bits of flashback and then going back to the island really quick and then back to the flashback. But this one, we stick with the flashback. And we realize that Desmond's had these powers for a while. Like he had these on the mainland, right? He starts predicting football games and people getting hit in the head with bats and stuff.
And it makes you wonder, like, did he have it all along? Is history a circle? Is time a circle? A perpetual loop? Or did turning the key put his subconsciousness back into his older self, and then he's able to make changes, because he tries to make changes, but it doesn't necessarily work? Shout out to Big Will and Wingnut for coming by. Thanks, guys, for jumping in the chat.
Hey, Big Will. Hey, Wingnut. Yeah, like I think when the implosion happened at the hatch, and there was that big purple light that went out that was like a magnetic pulse, I think something happened to Desmond there that kind of pushed his present self into his past self, and vice versa, and maybe had pushed part of his future self into his present self as well, because now he's seeing certain future events happening, and he's trying to stop Charlie's death, but he can't. He knows he can't, right?
Which is the great twist at the end, right? It seems like he's been saving Claire all this time, but the twist is, no, I've been trying to save your life, Charlie, and I can't. And I'm super depressed about the fact that I think the final line is, "You're gonna die, Charlie." And it's a great setup for the rest of the season, because here we are, episode 8 of 20 something, and they're already dropping this huge bomb.
At some point, Charlie's going to die. Now, I know the actor had to die because he got a part in Lord of the Rings. and I think he had to go and film it.
I want to say he was done with Lord of the Rings at this point, but he had gotten a part on another show or something.
Was it? When was this episode? 2004? No, maybe you're right. Maybe it was.
Yeah, because the Lord of the Rings came out in 2001, 2, and 3.
So was he doing this at both? Like, was he doing Lord of the
No,
Rings?
I think he had finished the main shoot for Lord of the Rings, all 3 films, and then had come to Hawaii to shoot.
Okay, so maybe just because TV gets released quicker.
Yeah, he was one of the big stars when the show first launched. It was him, and it was Matthew Fox, and everybody else. Nobody had heard of any of these guys.
Right. Yeah, because nobody had ever heard of Linda Evangeline Lilly at that point, for sure, right? Like she had done some modeling but never had been an actor and got cast to the show. So people were like, yeah, she's a pretty girl, but who is she, right? Like she's a pretty Canadian girl.
So this episode does set up a lot of not only what's going to go on this season, but sort of Desmond's arc on the show. It's sort of, I don't want to say birthed right here, but definitely it's sort of like the foundations are laid. This character of Eloise Hawkins is a character that has huge importance going forward. And here we see her as a random sort of engagement ring saleswoman who is aware that Desmond is skipping in time and also trying to teach him some of the rules of time travel.
Right, which is where the whole thing about him not being able to change Charlie's death comes in. Like she explains that whole factor with the man with the red shoes. That she's like, "Oh, look at this guy with the red shoes," and then suddenly he's killed. And Desmond questions, "No, why didn't you try and save him?" And she's like, "It's useless. He would just die tomorrow some other way." Right? The universe has a way of correcting itself. Is her term.
Yeah, that free will versus destiny element that I think is a real interesting sort of fundamental kind of element to these Desmond sort of moments.
Yeah, and like you can't change your destiny. Right? It is your destiny. But and Desmond is the epitome of that. He is the epitome of, he's the soothsayer of Lost, and he is going to tell everybody everything that's going to happen, and nobody's going to believe him, and there's nothing they can do about it anyway, right? So a lot of times he doesn't even say things much in the same way the mentor woman in the show. She doesn't do anything to help the guy with the red shoes.
No,
because why bother, right? It's just this is his time. That's when he's supposed to go, right?
So this season kind of ends with the others sort of selecting who they want to keep. Ben, after getting the surgery he's always wanted and sort of also being able to renege on his deal with Jack, basically sends plans on like separating the group and making an offer to Locke to keep him, and telling Locke, like in that episode you're talking about, are you going to talk about the magic box again? He's like, no, I'm going to show you what came out of it. And then you have that great reveal of who is the man from Tallahassee. And the final word of the season is Locke opens the door, looks inside, and there's Dad, right?
Dad. And it's not the end of the season. It's the midway point, right? We're only catching the first 13 episodes. But like when I rewatched the episodes again to get ready for this show, I kept going because I was like, oh yeah, I forgot the dad in the closet, right? Because they ended on such a cliffhanger. And then you actually have to go a couple episodes deeper into the season before you get a resolve on what's going to happen. I'm not going to say what's going to happen to you.
In my top 5 favorite episodes, the resolve for this it became my number 5 or my number 4. I don't remember which, but the Brig episode, which is not far out, is one of my all-time favorites. Again, you get another like Sawyer, Locke, 2 of my favorite characters. That whole sequence is just absolutely badass. Some great lines in Man from Tallahassee too about how do you know so much about this island? I've been here my whole life. And Locke saying things like, well, I'm you're in that chair and I'm not. There's a lot of great banter between Ben and Locke.
Some really great lines, and it really establishes there's a big connection between John and the island, right?
And Ben's jealousy of that.
Yeah, very jealous because he doesn't have that same connection, right?
And then I don't know if you noticed the line when Locke is in like rehab that the rehab gentleman tells him, "I don't want to hear about what you can't do."
Right.
The PT or the physical therapist or whatever that's working with him basically feeds him the line that we've seen him feeding all of us ever since.
Yes. Don't tell me what I can't do. And, with John too, like establishing him as being part of this island, I think it established it for the character. John had a sense that he was somehow connected, but it wasn't until the man from Tallahassee that it really cemented that he's connected to this island and he has his own agenda and he doesn't care what other people are, and his agenda is to stay on that island.
Right.
And
not to jeopardize what he's gotten.
That's right. Not to go back into that chair. So even
if it's somebody else's chance to get off of the island, he would rather them lose out than have it, even at the risk of losing what he's got.
Exactly. Like Jack had the chance to get on that submarine. John didn't care. He blew it up. And Ben even explained, that boat will never be back. It doesn't make a difference if you blow it up or not. No, just to make sure his agenda is satisfied, he sinks that boat. He sinks that submarine.
Epic, absolutely epic. So, is there any last thoughts? Anything you want to say here at the end, Dave? Anything that you feel like we didn't get to?
Yeah, I had a question. So you're John, you're Kate, and the other one's Charlie. And I think I saw your nephew jump in there, and he's Jack.
And my niece,
coincidence, buddy, because there are no coincidences on Lost.
And my niece is Penny.
Oh, come on! Is your sister?
No, this is my brother's kids.
Oh, your brother's kids. Are you and your brother naming your kids after Lost characters?
It's not a coincidence for sure. I had Kate way before any of my brother, like 3 years before anybody else in my family had kids. We had Kate, and my wife and I had always liked that name, and the show kind of just sealed the deal for us. And then both of my brothers, their wives were pregnant at the same time as we had Charlie, and it was all like, who's gonna, and the show had basically finished because I met the creator of the show while we were having our newborn. Within a month of her birth, she was born in September. I met the creator of Lost, and he was on his vacation because the show had just finished, like they had just wrapped. Right. And he was visiting Southern California on a trip. And so, yeah, I got to pick Charlie's name. We agreed on Kate. I got to pick Charlie's name. I picked Charlotte, which is a character on the show.
Yes.
And then we went with Charlie, the shortened version. My younger brother, he's a big basketball guy. He named his son John Wooden for the basketball coach of UCLA's famous sort of run of wins in the NCAA tournament. But he calls his son Jack. So it was like John Locke and Jack all kind of mixed in one with his boy. And then for whatever reason, I thought that was a fluke because he's a basketball guy and it all came from there. But then he named his daughter Penny without me knowing anything about it. And we had this sort of like set of 4 characters. My older brother, by the way, blew it and has no Lost connection with his kids at all.
But
we didn't leave him a lot of good choices. I don't think he was going to name his kid's son and Jin.
No doubt. Could have named him.
No, it was Charlie was very much intentional in the sense that I wanted a fun boy's name for a girl, but then I also wanted Charlotte, and I thought, wow, look at all these cool Lost connections we can get out of this. Yeah.
Okay, you're a bigger Lost fan than me. Your name is.
It was an excuse. We had good reasons and then ridiculous reasons, and thankfully my wife could buy into the good reasons.
Yeah. Okay, well, their question answered.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for doing this, taking time. I know it's a little late where you are. To join me for this, and we will definitely make sure that we get you back here when we get to the end of all of this excitement. So, do you have any shows coming up? Anything you want to plug coming up on your channel?
We are coming up on Graders Notes next week. I'm going to do that one with Comic Head 84 and Metarog and Genome Presents, and we're going to go over Aliens versus Predator limited series. So that will be
nice.
And I should have my regular Wednesday video coming out next week, their speculation video. So, how
Awesome.
about you? You got
Yeah.
anything coming up?
For me, let's see. I don't think I'm going to have the girls Saturday morning, so it might just be me doing Saturday morning comics. And then next week we have no book club, so I'm going to replace book club with something else that I'll announce when I get a little bit closer. Monday night, I'm supposed to be on Comic Books NYC's channel because we're going to be diving into Hush, the Batman run.
Nice. I like that guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and I want to say we're partnered with Comic Head 84 on that one. So it might be him, the two of them, and I'm the guest on that one. And I'm trying to get together another one of my short starting line videos that I've been editing together lately to throw out a little edited content from time to time.
Yeah, I like that video that you put out. I was glad to see that.
Yeah, so it's nice to have something that's edited. I know most of my stuff is live streams, but that's kind of fun because it is awesome to talk to people like you and spend time sharing things that we really enjoy.
Well, I really enjoyed being here on your show tonight because, yeah, I will talk about Lost. We could do another hour. I could easily talk about it.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you saw Bueller and I try to do like season 1, and it was like 2.5 hours of just drivel.
Recapping every episode, yeah.
Oh, man. I've learned a few things from them. I think this was a lot better, a lot more fun. If you've watched this and catch the recap, let me know what you think about this slightly new format. I thought it was a lot of fun. Thanks, Dave, so much for joining me. Stay tuned for the beginning of June. I'll be meeting with Perry Comics, and we'll be finishing season 3. We will get that "we have to go back" moment. So look forward to that. No, is that? Yeah, that is the have to go back moment. Yeah. And so we'll find out what happens with the "you're gonna die, Charlie." So hopefully I'll see you back here for Get Lost. Until then, have a great night.
Night, everybody.